The dog ran towards the suitcase and started barking desperately. When the police opened the suitcase, everyone began to cry upon seeing what was inside. It was a typical morning at Barcelona airport. People rushed by dragging their suitcases, voices mingling in different languages, and the sound of rolling luggage echoed through the massive hall. Amid all the chaos, a shiner-coated German shepherd with keen eyes patrolled the area. Duke, as he was called, wasn't just any dog. He was a silent hero, trained to sniff out what human eyes couldn't see. Duke was used to inspecting hundreds of suitcases daily. He had found it all: drugs hidden in false compartments, dangerous small devices, and even illegal food remnants. But that morning, something different happened. As he sniffed with his usual efficiency, he abruptly stopped. His paws were firmly planted on the ground, his body tense like a drawn bow. He wouldn't take his eyes off a grey suitcase sitting near the conveyor belt. Something about that suitcase deeply unsettled him. Suddenly, he began sniffing more intensely, circling the suitcase as if trying to solve a puzzle. But Duke didn't stop there. He barked, and it wasn't an ordinary bark. It was strong, urgent, almost desperate. The officer accompanying him, Agent Ramirez, knew this wasn't normal behavior. He's found something. Something serious, Ramirez said, signaling the other officers. The other police officers approached cautiously. Ramirez tried to call Duke back, but the dog stood his ground. He kept staring at the suitcase as if it held a secret that had to be uncovered. When Ramirez moved closer, Duke began scratching the suitcase with his paws. His movements were quick, almost frantic, as if he was saying, "Open this now." The atmosphere began to shift. People were moved away to ensure safety, and tension spread. Could it be explosives? One agent asked. Or drugs? Another suggested. No one was sure, but everyone trusted Duke. He was never wrong. Duke's barks were like sirens cutting through the airport's chaos. He was fixated on the suitcase, and his stance suggested something serious. The officers, who were familiar with the dog's behavior, exchanged quick, apprehensive glances. Something about that bag had triggered the German shepherd's alarm, and ignoring it wasn't an option. "Clear the area now," Ramirez ordered a nearby colleague. In seconds, a perimeter was established, and passengers and staff were directed away from the scene. The suitcase remained there, solitary on the floor, surrounded only by Duke's unwavering gaze and the heightened alertness of the officers. Silence began to settle, but the tension only grew. "If he's reacting this way, it's serious," one agent commented, adjusting his bulletproof vest. The protocol for suspected explosives was immediately activated. Ramirez knew every second counted. He called in the specialized unit for inspection, but in the meantime, the team initiated preliminary procedures. First, they used portable chemical detection equipment. A small scanner was passed around the suitcase, trying to detect any trace of dangerous substances. Nothing. No evident signs of explosives so far, but no one relaxed. "It could be something well hidden," another officer said, adjusting his protective helmet's visor. He carefully pulled out a telescopic mirror and inserted it between the suitcase zippers, trying to see its contents without opening it. Everything seemed normal, but Duke wouldn't stop. He was there, by the suitcase, with his paws firmly on the ground, head low, and ears pointed forward. It was as if he was saying, "You still don't understand what I'm trying to show you." The bomb squad arrived a few minutes later, bringing more advanced equipment. They used a robot to approach the suitcase and conduct another inspection. Everyone watched intently, breathing heavily as the small wheeled device positioned itself in front of the luggage. The robot scanned, took thermal images, and even used vibration sensors, but still, there was no evidence of explosives. Yet, the suspicion remained. If it wasn't a bomb, what could justify Duke's insistence? Ramirez couldn't take his eyes off the dog. He had known Duke for years and knew he never made mistakes. It could be something else, he thought out loud as the agents awaited the final equipment results. The silence was broken by the bomb squad technician. No trace of explosives. The suitcase is safe to open. The relief was momentary, but the question remained. If it wasn't a chemical or explosive threat, why was Duke so agitated? Ramirez sighed, watching the dog for another moment before giving the order, "Open it." I want to see what's inside." And so, with caution and nerves on edge, the officers prepared to uncover the mystery behind the suitcase that had brought the airport to a standstill. Before we continue, remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you love animals and enjoy hearing their emotional and inspiring stories. The room fell into tense silence as the officers prepared to open the suitcase. Duke, the German shepherd, remained in position, his eyes fixed on the object as if protecting something precious. Agent Ramirez slowly slid the zipper open, the sound of metal tearing through fabric louder than ever in the muffled atmosphere. When the suitcase was finally opened, everyone leaned in to see what was inside. What they found was something no one expected. At the bottom of the suitcase, crammed into a tiny space, were 3 kittens. They were so small that at first glance, they looked like plush toys, but there was nothing cute or comforting about the scene. They were thin, their bones visible beneath their delicate skin, and their fur was matted and dirty. The worst part was their apathy. The kittens could barely move. Only one of them managed to lift its head briefly, letting out a meow so weak it sounded like a whisper. "Oh my God," murmured one of the agents, unable to hide his shock. Ramirez knelt down to get a closer look. The kittens were dehydrated, their fragile bodies trembling slightly, as if fighting against cold and hunger. Around them, small scraps of dirty fabric suggested that someone had tried to improvise a lining, but it did little to lessen the impact of the evident cruelty. "Who would do something like this?" another officer asked, his voice heavy with indignation. But the answer was clear. This wasn't an accident or negligence. The kittens hadn't ended up there by chance. This was a case of animal trafficking, and one of the cruelest kinds. The kittens were rare. Their exotic markings and unusual fur color suggested they belonged to a valuable species in the illegal animal trade. Animal trafficking isn't just a crime. It's a practice that destroys lives, separates animal families, and causes severe imbalances in the environment. To the traffickers, these tiny creatures were just commodities, pieces of a lucrative scheme that completely disregarded the victim's suffering. As the officers processed the scene, Duke stayed close, as if guarding the kittens. It was as if he knew his mission wasn't over yet. The suitcase was no longer just a suspicious object, it was evidence of something much bigger, a crime that would require thorough investigation. But at that moment, the priority was saving those tiny lives. The agents knew that every second mattered. Ramirez, who had faced tough situations in his career, never imagined something like this. He knelt down, examining the kittens more closely. Their tiny bodies were so thin their bones were visible beneath their fragile skin. Their fur was dirty and tangled, and their swollen bellies were a clear sign of severe malnutrition. "They're in really bad shape," he murmured, trying to stay calm but feeling a lump in his throat. The kittens, so fragile, couldn't even protest their situation. Only one of them let out a faint meow, almost a whisper, as if begging for help. The sound was so soft it was barely audible, but it was enough to break the silence and tug at everyone's hearts. "Get them out of here, quickly!" shouted one of the agents, already pulling out his phone to call a veterinarian. Ramirez carefully picked up one of the kittens. It weighed almost nothing in his hands, so light it seemed it could disappear. "How could someone do this?" he asked, looking at his colleagues. Everyone was shocked. It was impossible not to feel outrage in the face of such cruelty. The suitcase, once merely suspicious, was now a crime scene. A crime against such small and defenseless beings. Duke, the heroic dog, stayed close, watching the kittens with curiosity and concern. He seemed to understand that he had saved their lives, but he also seemed restless, as if sensing their fight wasn't over yet. The officers improvised a blanket from what they had on hand, trying to warm the kittens. But it was clear they needed urgent care. Their trembling legs and fragile bodies were a painful reminder that time was running out. The suitcase wasn't just a cramped space, it was a prison that had nearly killed them. Faced with this scene, a question lingered in the air: who could be capable of such cruelty? And why? The mystery was no longer just about saving the kittens but also about discovering how they had ended up there. As the agents organized to get the little ones to a veterinarian, Duke stared at the now empty suitcase, as if saying, "You need to dig deeper. This is just the beginning." When the kittens finally arrived at the vet, the scene was one of urgency. The kittens were placed on a heated table, and an entire team began working to stabilize them. They administered fluids for rehydration, conducted exams to assess the damage caused by malnutrition, and, most importantly, provided gentle care. The kittens, still fragile, began to show the first signs of relief. But during the detailed exams, a surprising discovery changed the course of the story. While examining one of the kittens, the veterinarian noticed something under its skin. "There's a microchip here," he said, intrigued. The team immediately checked the other 2 kittens and found the same device in all of them: identification chips. The initial surprise gave way to curiosity, and soon after, a certainty emerged. These kittens had a story, and it didn't begin with that suitcase. The veterinarian connected the microchip scanner to a computer and entered the first code. Everyone leaned in to see the result. When the origin appeared on the screen, the room fell silent again. "Zoo in Egypt," the veterinarian read aloud. These kittens were registered as part of a zoo. But it wasn't just any zoo, it was a renowned institution known for housing rare and exotic species. The connection was clear: the kittens had been stolen. Ramirez, who had been closely monitoring the examinations, frowned. "So, they're not just abandoned kittens. This is animal trafficking," he said, connecting the dots. The fact that the kittens were in such a debilitated state felt even crueler now that they knew where they had come from. Someone had taken these little ones from a place where they should have been protected, subjecting them to inhumane transport and conditions that nearly killed them. The information on the microchips revealed more details. The kittens belonged to a rare feline species, highly sought after on the black market by collectors and exotic animal traffickers. They were valuable, not for the lives they had but for the profit they could generate for criminals. This explained the presence of the chips. The zoo had used them to protect its animals from theft, but this time, the system had failed. "Who does this to such tiny creatures?" the veterinarian asked, visibly shaken. Ramirez didn't respond, but the hardened expression on his face showed he was determined to get to the bottom of this case. The chips were the first solid lead to understanding how these kittens ended up in the suitcase. More importantly, they were a starting point to dismantle a network that was likely trafficking many more animals like them. While the kittens were being treated, the data from the chips was shared with international authorities. The investigation was just beginning, but one thing was certain: these kittens, who had barely survived, might be the key to bringing down something much bigger. With the chip information in hand, the police knew they were dealing with something far more significant than it first appeared. The kittens weren't just victims of cruelty, they were pieces of an international exotic animal trafficking scheme. Their origin in the Egyptian zoo and their critical condition raised urgent questions. Who was behind this? And how had the kittens traveled so far to end up at the airport in Barcelona? The investigative team began piecing the puzzle together. The first step was locating the suitcase's owner. Using airport baggage records, the agents quickly identified a name: William Carter. He had passed through passport control and was waiting for a connecting flight. The tension rose. They needed to find him before he got away. While one team scoured security camera footage, another began searching for William in the airport. The footage revealed a calm-looking man casually carrying the suspicious suitcase. He didn't seem nervous or try to hide, exactly the kind of behavior that allowed him to blend in. But now, with Duke and the kittens exposing the truth, his cover had been blown. The police finally located William near the boarding gate, moments before he was about to board a plane. They approached carefully, not drawing attention. When Agent Ramirez placed a hand on the man's shoulder, he turned, confused. "Mr. Carter, we need you to come with us," Ramirez said firmly. The man tried to protest, but the authority of the officers and the presence of armed agents made it clear he had no choice. As he was escorted to an interrogation room, William remained silent. His calm demeanor began to crumble when he realized the authorities already knew about the kittens and the microchips. During the interrogation, he tried to deny any direct involvement, claiming he didn't know what was in the suitcase. But the evidence was overwhelming. The investigative team discovered that William was a middleman tasked with transporting the kittens to a European buyer willing to pay a fortune for them. The investigation continued, and the information William provided led to something even bigger. He was just one cog in a sophisticated animal trafficking network with connections in multiple countries. The kittens' chips and documents found in the luggage led police to other suspects, including contacts at the Egyptian Zoo. The network was extensive, but with William in custody, the thread connecting everything began to unravel. International authorities got involved, collaborating to track down and arrest other members of the criminal organization. The discovery of the kittens triggered an operation that spanned borders and had the potential to save countless other animals. Duke, the German shepherd who had started it all, had given the police a chance to dismantle one of the region's largest trafficking networks. In the interrogation room, under mounting pressure from the evidence and the threat of a severe sentence, William finally confessed his role in the scheme. He provided crucial details, including the buyer's name and the route the kittens were supposed to take. His confession sealed the fate of the criminal organization. Meanwhile, the kittens, still recovering, became symbols of a greater fight. They were not just victims, they were living proof that, even in the worst circumstances, the truth finds a way to emerge. And it was all thanks to the determination of a dog who never ignored what his nose told him. As the investigation took on international proportions, the tiny kittens were fighting their own battle. After being rescued from the suitcase and taken to the vet, every minute was critical. Their fragile, dehydrated, and malnourished bodies required intensive care to give them a chance at survival. The shelter team, accustomed to caring for animals in dire situations, knew this would be a tough fight. The kittens were fed through a tube, as they were too weak to eat on their own. Intravenous fluids were the first step to combat severe dehydration, and antibiotics were administered to treat infections caused by filth and parasites. A warm light was positioned near them to stabilize their body temperatures, which trembled constantly. Even with all these efforts, their condition remained delicate. One kitten, the smallest and most frail, seemed to have even slimmer chances than the other two. It barely moved and had difficulty breathing. "We don't know if he'll make it," said one of the veterinarians, gently holding the tiny feline in her hands. Despite the challenges, no one was willing to give up. The following days were a mix of tension and hope. Every small victory was celebrated by the team. The first kitten managed to fully open its eyes, revealing a brilliant blue color that captured everyone's hearts. The second, more active one, began to meow softly and even attempted to stand, though its legs were still too weak. The third, the most fragile, remained a cause for concern but continued to fight. Every breath it took was proof that it wasn't ready to give up. While the kittens struggled for their lives, something remarkable happened. Duke, the German shepherd who had rescued them, was brought to the shelter for a visit. As soon as he entered the room where the kittens were, his demeanor changed. He approached cautiously, as if understanding their fragility. When he got closer, the kittens reacted unexpectedly. The smallest one, which had barely moved before, lifted its head for the first time and let out a faint meow, as if recognizing its savior. The connection between Duke and the kittens moved everyone. The dog stayed by the incubator, watching them closely and occasionally touching the glass with his nose. It was as if he knew his mission wasn't over. Duke's presence seemed to energize the kittens, as if they knew they were safe now. As weeks passed, the intensive care began to show results. The kittens started gaining weight, their coats regained their shine, and their once dull eyes now sparkled with curiosity and life. The smallest one, defying all odds, took its first step, a tiny movement that brought applause and tears from everyone at the shelter. Their recovery was a slow process, but each milestone strengthened the resolve of their caretakers. These kittens, who had begun their journey in a cramped and cruel suitcase, now had a new chance at life. With every step toward recovery, they became symbols of hope and resilience. The special bond with Duke remained. Whenever he visited, the kittens approached him with trust, as if they knew he was their hero. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes, they have paws. The kittens' recovery marked a new chapter in the story, but one constant remained: Duke. From the moment the kittens were rescued from that cramped suitcase, Duke seemed to understand that his mission wasn't over. Despite being a dog trained to sniff out dangers, he demonstrated something beyond his learned skills, an emotional connection that went far beyond anything training could explain. When the kittens began to recover, Duke was brought to the shelter to see them again. He walked through the facility with his usual confident posture, but as soon as he entered the room where the kittens were, his attitude completely shifted. He approached the makeshift bed with slow, deliberate steps, almost as if he knew he needed to be gentle. His presence seemed to fill the room with a calm and protective energy. The kittens, still weak, immediately reacted to Duke's presence. The smallest one, who had been struggling to survive from the start, tried to lift its head and let out a faint meow. The other two, more active, moved toward the dog as if drawn to him. Duke tilted his head and sat beside them, watching attentively, almost as if he were checking to make sure they were truly okay. The moment that followed deeply moved everyone present. Duke, with his massive figure compared to the kittens' fragile bodies, remained perfectly still, simply observing them. When one of the kittens attempted to climb onto his paw, Duke didn't move at all, allowing the kitten to nestle there. It was as if he understood the delicacy of the situation and wanted to offer comfort. The scene was more than just a reunion. It was as if Duke were communicating to the kittens that they were safe now. He, the hero who had sniffed out the hidden danger, had now become a silent guardian. The kittens seemed to sense this. Whenever Duke was present, they became more active, as if his strength inspired them. For the shelter team and the police officers, Duke came to be seen as much more than just a detection dog. He was a true hero, with a heart as big as his skills. The story of the rescue quickly spread, and Duke's connection with the kittens became a symbol of hope. On social media, images of Duke sitting next to the kittens went viral, touching the hearts of people around the world. The bond between Duke and the kittens wasn't just moving, it also brought greater visibility to the issue of animal trafficking. People began to see the importance of the work done by dogs like Duke and the need to protect the most vulnerable. Even after the kittens fully recovered, Duke continued visiting the shelter whenever he could. He never forgot to stop by their room, as if to make sure everything was okay. The kittens, now stronger and more playful, would run around him, trying to climb his legs and play with his tail. It was a scene that brought smiles to everyone who watched. Duke didn't need words to show his loyalty and compassion. With his silent gestures and imposing presence, he demonstrated that a true hero doesn't need recognition, just a heart willing to make a difference. The discovery of the kittens and the capture of William didn't end the story. On the contrary, it was just the beginning of a bigger battle. The police, with information obtained through the Chips and Williams confessions, expanded the investigation beyond Spain's borders. In collaboration with international authorities, they tracked down other cases connected to the same exotic animal trafficking scheme. What started with a suitcase at the Barcelona airport led to the discovery of a criminal network operating in several countries, exploiting and trafficking rare animals for unscrupulous collectors. Among the most shocking revelations was a connection to a zoo in Egypt, from where the kittens had been stolen. The zoo owner, a publicly respected figure, was identified as an accomplice in the scheme. He used his position to facilitate the theft and transport of rare species while secretly profiting from the illegal trade. When the truth came to light, his arrest was widely publicized, marking a significant victory in the fight against animal trafficking. Meanwhile, Duke became a symbol of this victory. His determination to alert about the suitcase not only saved 3 lives but also exposed a crime network that might have otherwise gone unpunished. The German Shepherd, already well known among airport officers, was now celebrated by people worldwide. His photos and videos alongside the kittens went viral, inspiring campaigns against animal trafficking and showing how even small acts can have a big impact. Even in his advanced age, Duke continued working at the airport. He became an iconic figure, both for his colleagues and for passengers who recognized him. Many approached to take photos and thank him for his work, while others made donations to animal protection organizations in his honor. Duke seemed unfazed by the attention. For him, it was just another day fulfilling his duty. Duke's legacy went beyond the airport. He inspired the creation of new training programs for detection dogs, focusing not only on dangerous substances but also on identifying signs of wildlife trafficking. His story became an example of how animals can be essential allies in protecting other living beings, especially the most vulnerable. The positive impact of Duke and the kitten story was felt in many areas. Donations to the shelter that cared for the kittens skyrocketed, allowing for the expansion of its space and the rescue of more animals in critical conditions. Awareness campaigns about exotic animal trafficking gained momentum, reaching millions of people on social media. Additionally, the case motivated legislative changes in some countries, increasing penalties for crimes related to the illegal wildlife trade. The kittens, now healthy and playful, were adopted together by a family who had closely followed their story. Even in their new home, they never failed to react lovingly whenever they saw Duke. It was as if the little ones knew they owed their lives to that silent hero. The story of Duke and the kittens showed the world that good can prevail, even in dark scenarios. It taught that courage, compassion, and determination, coming from a dog and a team of committed people, can transform lives and create an impact that resonates for a long time. Thank you for watching the video until the end. Remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your opinion about this topic in the comments.